Welcome to our scary stories, where we bring you spine-chilling tales that will make you sleep with the lights on. I'm your host for this evening, and today's episode is titled, Trapped in a Haunted Cabin, 5 Terrifying Tales You'll Never Forget. From vengeful spirits seeking justice to ancient entities feeding on fear, these eerie stories will make you think twice before spending a night in a secluded cabin in the woods. Are you ready to venture into the darkness and explore the unknown? Well, let's begin. Our first story of the night is titled The Cabin of the Whispering Shadows. Mike and Karen stepped cautiously into the dense forest of Oregon, the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves filling their nostrils. The canopy above filtered the sunlight, casting eerie, dappled shadows on the forest floor. The quiet rustle of leaves and occasional bird call were the only sounds that accompanied them as they ventured further in. "What do you think is out here?" Karen whispered, clutching her notebook to her chest. Her heart raced with anticipation and a hint of fear, her breath shallow and quick. "I don't know," Mike replied, his camera hanging from his neck as he scanned their surroundings. "But let's find out." They continued through the woods, the oppressive silence growing heavier with each step. The temperature seemed to drop as they stumbled upon the old, hidden cabin. It stood like a dark sentinel among the trees, its wooden walls weathered and worn, the windows like hollow eyes staring back at them. As they pushed open the creaky door, the musty smell of aged wood and mildew greeted them. The cabin was dimly lit, shadows flickering on the walls as sunlight filtered through the cracks. Cobwebs hung from the rafters like old lace, and a thick layer of dust coated every surface. Karen shivered, feeling a chill run down her spine. "This place gives me the creeps," she admitted, her voice barely audible. Mike nodded, snapping photos of the cabin's interior. "It's unsettling, but there's something intriguing about it too," he said, his eyes gleaming with curiosity. As they explored the cabin, they discovered an old, tattered journal on a dusty shelf. Karen carefully opened it, revealing pages filled with meticulous handwriting. "This belonged to Jonathan Turner," she said, her voice quivering with excitement. "He was a gold prospector who got lost in these woods over a century ago." Mike peered over her shoulder, his interest piqued. "What happened to him?" "He never found his way out," Karen replied, her eyes scanning the pages. "He starved to death in this very cabin." A gust of wind blew through the cabin, rattling the windows and causing the temperature to plummet. The hairs on the back of their necks stood on end, and they exchanged uneasy glances. "Did you feel that?" Karen asked, her voice barely a whisper. Mike nodded. "Let's see if we can find any more information about Jonathan in this journal." As they read through the entries, they began to experience chilling paranormal events. Footsteps echoed through the cabin, even though they were alone. Objects moved on their own, and cold spots seemed to follow them around. One evening, as they huddled together by the flickering fire, they heard a disembodied voice whispering their names. They turned to see the apparition of Jonathan Turner, his gaunt face twisted with despair. "Help me," he rasped, his voice filled with anguish. Terrified, but compelled to aid the tormented spirit, Mike and Karen decided to retrace Jonathan's final journey. They set out into the woods, armed with the journal as their guide, their fear mingling with determination. As they retraced Jonathan's steps, they encountered harrowing supernatural manifestations. Shadowy figures lurked just beyond their vision, and the air crackled with tension. The scent of decay grew stronger, and the sense of dread intensified. Karen clung to Mike's arm, her body trembling. "What if we can't do this?" she whispered, tears brimming in her eyes. "We have to try," Mike said, his voice firm but gentle. "For Jonathan's sake, and for our own." Through their courage and perseverance, they uncovered the truth about Jonathan's tragic fate. He had been betrayed by his own brother, who left him to die in the woods after stealing his share of the gold. Fueled by this revelation, Karen and Mike vowed to bring justice to Jonathan's spirit and free him from his eternal torment. As they confronted the descendants of Jonathan's treacherous brother, the forest around them seemed to come alive with supernatural activity. A wind howled through the trees, and the earth seemed to tremble beneath their feet. Despite their fear, they stood their ground, exposing the family's dark secret and demanding they make amends. With the truth finally revealed, they returned to the cabin, where Jonathan's spirit awaited them. The air inside the cabin felt lighter, and the overwhelming sense of dread had dissipated. "Thank you," Jonathan whispered, his spectral form appearing before them. "You have given me peace at last." As his spirit faded away, the cabin seemed to shed its oppressive atmosphere, the shadows receding and sunlight streaming through the cracks in the walls. Mike and Karen exchanged relieved smiles, their hearts swelling with a sense of accomplishment. They left the cabin behind, knowing they had not only survived their harrowing encounter with the supernatural, but had also brought justice to a tormented soul. As they walked through the forest, the oppressive silence that had once enveloped them now felt filled with life and hope. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the woods in a warm golden glow, Mike and Karen emerged from the forest, their lives forever changed by their chilling journey into the unknown. The haunted cabin and the spirit of Jonathan Turner would remain etched in their memories, a testament to their courage and the power of redemption. Our next story of the night is titled The Secrets of the Forgotten Cabin. Jack, Lisa, Tim, and Emily stood outside the rustic, two-story cabin nestled within the Appalachian Mountains. The crisp autumn air was filled with the scent of pine needles and decaying leaves, as the wind whispered through the treetops above. The fading light cast eerie shadows on the cabin's weathered wooden walls, giving the place a feeling of foreboding. As they stepped inside, the creaking floorboards and musty smell of old wood and dampness greeted them. The flickering glow of a fireplace cast a warm, yet unsettling light upon the sparsely furnished room. The windows, clouded with age, offered only glimpses of the encroaching darkness outside. "Wow," Emily said, her voice shaking slightly. "This place is creepy." "It's perfect for our weekend getaway," Tim replied, his enthusiasm undiminished. "We wanted something off the beaten path, right?" Jack and Lisa exchanged uneasy glances. "We did," Lisa said, "but I didn't expect it to be so dark." As the night progressed, the friends began to notice odd occurrences in the cabin. Strange noises echoed through the halls, and cold drafts sent shivers down their spines. The atmosphere grew heavy, as if charged with an unseen energy. "I don't like this," Emily whispered to Tim as they lay in bed. "I feel like we're being watched." "Relax," Tim reassured her. "It's just an old cabin. These places always have their quirks." In the adjacent room, Jack and Lisa also struggled to sleep. The unrelenting feeling of unease seemed to seep into their very bones. Jack turned to Lisa and whispered, "Do you think there's something wrong with this place?" Lisa hesitated, her fear evident in her voice. "I don't know, but I think we should find out." The next day, the group decided to explore the cabin's history. They discovered that it had once been the site of horrific events, including witch trials, grisly murders, and unexplained disappearances. As they delved deeper into the past, the cabin's supernatural power revealed itself, transporting them through time to witness the tragedies firsthand. The friends found themselves standing in the same cabin, but centuries earlier. The air was heavy with the smell of burning wood and fear as they watched in horror as Abigail, the accused witch, was tortured and executed. They could almost feel the heat from the flames, hear the blood-curdling screams, and taste the bile rising in their throats. Later, they were transported to the early 20th century, where they bore witness to Samuel's brutal slayings. The metallic scent of blood hung in the air, as the desperate cries of his victims echoed through the cabin. The friends could feel their hearts pounding in their chests, the terror gripping them like a vice. Finally, they were thrust into the 1950s, where they uncovered the mystery of the Miller family's disappearance. The tense atmosphere was almost too much to take, as the family's secrets were revealed one by one. The friends could feel the weight of sorrow and betrayal suffocating them, as the cabin's dark history unfolded. Throughout these terrifying experiences, the friends clung to one another, their bonds growing stronger in the face of unimaginable horrors. They knew they had to break the cabin's curse and free the trapped spirits if they were ever to escape this nightmare. Together, they pieced together the clues, confronted the malevolent forces within the cabin, and ultimately brought closure to the restless souls. As they performed the final ritual, the friends could feel the oppressive atmosphere lift, the darkness giving way to a renewed sense of hope and light. As the cabin's curse was broken, the friends found themselves back in their own time, the horrors of the past now mere memories. They looked at one another, their faces etched with relief and newfound strength. "We did it," Jack said, his voice thick with emotion. "We freed them." The group embraced, their fear and terror replaced by a sense of triumph and unity. As they prepared to leave the time-worn cabin, they couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude for the experience. Despite the horrors they had endured, they had emerged stronger, their bonds unbreakable. As they drove away from the cabin, the sun began to rise over the mountains, casting a warm, golden light on the landscape. The friends shared knowing glances, forever changed by their harrowing ordeal. The time-worn cabin stood silently in the forest, its dark history now laid to rest. The spirits that had once haunted its walls were finally at peace, and the friends who had faced the horrors within had found a strength they never knew they possessed. And our next story is titled The Eerie Watcher of the Oppressive Forest. The sun dipped below the horizon as Daniel, Sarah, Alex, and Claire arrived at their cabin retreat in the dense forests of upstate New York. The trees stood like ancient pillars, casting long shadows that seemed to reach for the travelers. The scent of pine and damp earth filled their nostrils, while the distant hoot of an owl accompanied the whispers of the wind through the leaves. "This place is perfect," Claire exclaimed, her eyes wide with excitement. "It's so isolated and eerie. I can feel the history here." The cabin itself was a small, charming structure of weathered wood and stone, nestled against the backdrop of the imposing forest. The group entered, their footsteps echoing on the hardwood floor. The interior was cozy yet rustic, with the warmth of the fireplace casting flickering shadows on the walls. Daniel's eyes wandered to a painting of the forest, the colors and details so vivid it felt as though they were standing in the woods themselves. As night fell, the forest's embrace tightened around the cabin, the sounds of nocturnal creatures creating an eerie symphony. A shiver ran down Sarah's spine as she peered into the darkness outside the window. She could almost feel a presence lurking in the shadows, watching them. "I don't like it here," she whispered to Daniel, her voice wavering. "There's something wrong with this place." In an attempt to lighten the mood, the group decided to play a game of cards around the fireplace. The laughter and chatter filled the cabin, but the sense of unease lingered in the air like a thick fog. As the night wore on, a chilling breeze made its way through the cabin, snuffing out the fire and plunging them into darkness. They scrambled to light candles, their faces pale and eyes wide. "Do you hear that?" Alex asked, his voice tense. The others fell silent, listening intently. A faint, mournful wail seemed to carry on the wind, making the hair on the back of their necks stand on end. "It's just the wind," Daniel tried to reassure them, but his voice lacked conviction. Suddenly, the cabin door creaked open, revealing the dark, menacing forest beyond. They stared in horror as a figure emerged from the shadows, her translucent form glowing in the moonlight. It was the spirit of Eleanor, her eyes filled with sorrow and rage. "Leave this place," she hissed, her voice echoing through the cabin, "or suffer the same fate as I." Panic gripped the group as they struggled to comprehend the supernatural encounter. Claire clutched Sarah's hand, her knuckles white with fear. "We have to help her," Claire said, her voice trembling. "We can't leave her like this." Together, they resolved to uncover the truth behind Eleanor's death and release her spirit from the woods. As they delved deeper into the mystery, the forest seemed to come alive around them. The trees whispered secrets, and the wind carried echoes of past horrors. The search led them to the decaying remnants of a once grand estate, where they discovered evidence of a powerful businessman's involvement in Eleanor's murder. Armed with the truth, they confronted the man's descendants, their determination fueled by a desire for justice. As the truth came to light, Eleanor's spirit began to change. Her eyes softened with gratitude, and the darkness that had engulfed the forest began to dissipate. "You have freed me," she whispered, a tear streaming down her ghostly cheek. "Thank you." With the lifting of the curse, the group left the cabin and the forest behind, their hearts heavy with the weight of the past. The experience had changed them, binding them together in ways they could never have imagined. The haunting beauty of the woods now held a bittersweet memory, a testament to the power of redemption and the resilience of the human spirit. As they drove away from the cabin, the sun began to rise, casting a warm golden glow over the forest. The trees seemed to stand taller, the shadows less menacing, as if the darkness had been vanquished for good. A sense of peace settled over the landscape, and the group couldn't help but feel that they had left the forest a better place than they had found it. In the months that followed, they would often speak of their time at the cabin and the mysterious spirit that had brought them together. The experience had forged a bond between them, a shared understanding of the unseen world that lurked just beyond the veil of reality. For Daniel, the memory of the forest would forever be etched into his mind, a reminder of the thin line between life and death, and the power of the human spirit to overcome even the most insurmountable obstacles. Sarah found solace in the knowledge that they had helped a lost soul find peace, and she carried that sense of purpose with her in her daily life. Alex, ever the skeptic, couldn't deny the evidence of his own eyes. The encounter with Eleanor had shaken him to his core, but it had also given him a newfound appreciation for the mysteries of the world and the bonds that united him with his loved ones. And for Claire, the adventure had only fueled her desire to explore the unknown, to seek out the hidden corners of the world and uncover the secrets that lay within. Together, they had faced their fears, confronted the darkness, and emerged victorious. The haunted woods would always be a part of them, a reminder of the power of friendship and the indomitable human spirit. And as they continued on their separate paths, they knew that they would always carry the memory of the Watcher in the woods, a testament to the enduring nature of love, hope, and the quest for truth. This next story of the night is titled The Eternal Storm. Hall had been driving for hours, winding through the twisting roads of the Great Smoky Mountains, his wife Laura dozing off in the passenger seat. In the back, their teenage son Stephen stared out the window, earbuds in, lost in his music, while young Lily gazed at the passing scenery with wide-eyed wonder. As they approached their destination, the sky began to darken, and the first droplets of rain splattered against the windshield. The cozy wooden cabin, perched on a hill overlooking a steep valley, and surrounded by thick forests, loomed into view. Its warm, inviting glow offered a stark contrast to the storm brewing outside. "Here we are, folks," Paul announced, trying to inject some cheer into his voice. Home away from home for the weekend. The family stepped out of the car, inhaling the scent of damp earth and wet foliage. The air was thick with moisture, and a distant rumble of thunder echoed through the valley. The sense of isolation was both comforting and disquieting, as they realized just how far they were from civilization. The cabin's interior was warm and welcoming, lit by flickering candles and the soft glow of a fireplace. The family settled in, making themselves at home. The storm outside intensified, rain pelting the windows and wind howling through the trees. The atmosphere inside grew tense as well, as Paul and Stephen exchanged heated words about the boys' future, while Laura tried to mediate and Lily retreated to a quiet corner. As night fell, the storm showed no sign of letting up. The family gathered in the living room, huddling together for comfort, as the supernatural storm raged outside, reflecting the turmoil within their own hearts. "I don't understand what's happening," Lily whispered, her eyes filled with fear. "Why won't the storm stop?" Hall glanced out the window, his brow furrowed. "I don't know, sweetheart, but we'll figure it out." The wind intensified, shaking the cabin, and suddenly the power went out. The family was plunged into darkness, their fear now unbearable. They heard strange noises, creaking floorboards, and the distant sound of laughter carried on the wind. It seemed the storm was alive, feeding on their fear and growing stronger. Laura's voice trembled as she spoke. "We need to do something. This storm is not natural." The family huddled closer, exchanging frightened glances. It was then that Lily, her face pale, shared a revelation. "The storm is a reflection of our feelings. If we face our fears and find peace within ourselves, it'll stop." Her words resonated with the family, and they began to share their worries and secrets, unburdening their hearts. As they did so, the storm outside seemed to lose its power, the wind and rain gradually subsiding. "I'm sorry, Dad," Stephen said, tears in his eyes. "I don't want to fight anymore. I just want us to understand each other." Hall reached out, embracing his son. "I'm sorry too, Stephen. I'll try to be more open-minded." As they found unity and forgiveness, the storm outside finally ceased, replaced by an eerie calm. The family emerged from the cabin, gazing at the sky as the clouds parted and the stars began to shine. They knew they had faced the storm together and come out stronger for it. In the days that followed, they would speak of the supernatural storm that had brought them closer together, grateful for the shared experience that had healed their fractured bonds. The storm had served as a reminder of the power of love and unity, and the importance of facing one's fears in the face of darkness. And our last story is titled The Living Walls of the Cottage of Death. Thomas arrived at the remote cabin in the Rocky Mountains, eager to find solitude and inspiration for his latest novel. The cabin, nestled among towering pines, was a two-story wooden structure with an eerie, unsettling aura. The air was crisp and cool, carrying the scent of damp earth and pine needles. As he stepped inside, the creaking floorboards echoed through the empty space, the chill of the mountain air seeping through the gaps in the walls. The cabin's interior was dimly lit, with light filtering through the dusty windows, casting eerie shadows on the walls. A musty smell hung in the air, like forgotten memories and suppressed fears. Thomas felt an inexplicable unease as he began to settle in, his fingers brushing against the aged wood, which seemed to pulse with energy beneath his touch. Erin, the local historian and Thomas's old friend, came by the cabin to share her knowledge of its dark past. As they sat together by the flickering fireplace, Thomas couldn't shake the feeling that the walls were listening to their conversation. "Thomas, you're not going to believe this," Erin said, her voice a low whisper. "The walls of this cabin have absorbed the pain and suffering of its past inhabitants. They're alive with their stories." Thomas's eyes widened in disbelief, and he shivered involuntarily. "You mean the walls themselves are haunted?" Erin nodded solemnly. "Clara, a young woman from the early 1900s, died of hypothermia in this very room during a snowstorm. And George, a reclusive artist in the 1940s, went mad here and met a tragic end." As they spoke, the temperature in the cabin dropped, and the flames in the fireplace flickered wildly. Thomas and Erin exchanged uneasy glances, sensing the oppressive energy that weighed heavily upon the room. The following days were spent poring over old newspapers and journals, unraveling the tragic stories of Clara and George. As the sun set each evening, casting long shadows across the cabin, Thomas couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The walls seemed to breathe, whispering secrets in the darkness. Late one night, while Thomas was working on his novel, he heard a faint scratching sound coming from the walls. The room grew colder, and the air was thick with tension. He could feel Clara's spirit reaching out, desperate to share her story. The shadows on the walls morphed into twisted, tortured shapes, and George's sinister artwork appeared, as if bleeding through the wood. Thomas and Erin knew they had to confront the supernatural force that bound the spirits to the cabin. They devised a plan to release the energy of past tragedies and free the trapped souls. On the night of the ritual, the wind howled outside, rattling the cabin's windows. As they burned Clara's belongings and destroyed George's paintings, the walls seemed to scream in agony. The fire roared, the temperature plummeted, and the air was thick with fear and anticipation. Erin, her voice shaking, cried out, "Clara, George, we release you from this place. Be at peace." As the last remnants of the ritual burned away, the oppressive energy lifted, and the cabin fell silent. Thomas and Erin stood side by side, their breaths visible in the freezing air, as the spirits of Clara and George emerged from the walls. Their ghostly forms flickered for a moment before fading away, finally freed from their torment. With the spirits released and the cabin's dark history put to rest, Thomas and Erin left the cabin with a profound understanding of the weight of history and the power of redemption. The fear and suspense they experienced would haunt them forever, but the knowledge that they had helped Clara and George find peace made the harrowing experience worth it. As they walked away from the now empty cabin, the sun broke through the clouds, casting a warm golden light on the forest, as if welcoming a new beginning. Thomas and Erin remained close friends, bonded by the shared ordeal they had faced together. They spoke often about their experiences at the cabin, reflecting on the lessons they had learned about the importance of confronting the past and healing from it. For Thomas, the cabin had provided not only the isolation he had sought to overcome his writer's block, but also an extraordinary tale of fear, suspense, and redemption. His next novel, inspired by the haunting events at the cabin, would go on to become his most successful work yet, captivating readers with its chilling atmosphere and thrilling plot twists. As for the cabin in the Rockies, it remained standing, an empty testament to the power of memory and the resilience of the human spirit. With the souls of Clara and George finally at peace, the walls no longer whispered dark secrets or held captive the tormented spirits. The living walls had been silenced, but their story would live on, reminding those who dared to enter that even in the darkest corners of the world, there is always a chance for redemption and hope. And that concludes our journey into the shadowy world of haunted cabins with Trapped in a Haunted Cabin. 5 terrifying tales you'll never forget. I hope these spine-tingling stories have left you with chills running down your spine and a newfound appreciation for the mysteries that lurk in the most remote corners of our world. As always, I want to thank you for joining us on this eerie adventure into the unknown. If you've enjoyed these stories, be sure to subscribe to our Scary Stories for more episodes filled with fear, suspense, and the supernatural. And if you're brave enough, share your own terrifying tales with us on social media using the hashtag Our Scary Stories. Remember, the darkness may be filled with the unknown and the unexplained, but it's also where our imagination runs wild. So, until next time, keep the lights low, listen closely, and never forget that the things that go bump in the night might just be waiting for you to uncover their secrets. This is our Scary Stories signing off for tonight.